Hello, and welcome to today's ACC Young Professionals webinar on Teaming Best Practices, Strategy, and Etiquette. I'm Matt Griffin, the Director of Regulatory Affairs and Education at the Airport Consultants Council, and it is my pleasure to be the host of today's program. This is the first webinar of 2017 sponsored by the ACC Young Professionals Forum. With more than 70 sites, we continue to have strong participation in these types of programs. This is one of the many initiatives that have been undertaken by the Forum, and there are plans for several more webinars just like this in 2017. But first, for those of you not familiar with ACC, we are the international trade association that represents private and public businesses that help plan, design, operate, and supply airports across the country and around the world. ACC is the only association that represents private sector businesses involved in airport development. The Young Professionals Forum was formed as a means to engage YPs in airport development and enhance their careers. We are very pleased to have such a strong leadership team this year, which has provided so many opportunities for YPs to get involved. If you're not already on the forum's mailing list, please sign up via a link that is on your YP Forum webpage, or rather on the YP Forum webpage. Before getting underway, I have a few important logistical items. First, participants on the call will be muted. You'll remain muted throughout the call. We encourage you to ask questions using the questions window on the right-hand side of your screen. Also note that we will send you a copy of the presentation and a survey later today. I would like to remind you that you may notice a slight delay as I advance the slides as well. We appreciate your patience as we move through the presentation. And now I'm pleased to introduce today's webinar moderator and young professional, Cody Parham. Cody is a project manager with HDR, specializing in aviation civil infrastructure and site development. He earned his Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from the Georgia Institute of Technology and is a Florida registered professional engineer. Cody's roles have ranged from program manager for an international FBO to record engineer for a lead certified facilities at both GA and commercial airports. He recently was involved with roles at the AAAE ACC Airport Planning Design and Construction Symposium, Florida Airports Council, and the South Florida Business Aviation. With that, I will turn the program over to Cody, who will introduce today's webinar.
Thank you, Matt. So today we've put together a panel to talk about teaming, something that as a YP you may have had some exposure to. We're going to approach the subject from a few different viewpoints. First from that of the prime consultant, then the subconsultant, then the contractor in cases of alternative delivery, and then maybe the most interesting from the owner's perspective. So our goals today are to help you understand the reasons for developing a project approach consisting of multiple teammates, then to identify the best teaming strategies to apply in your pursuits, and finally to show you how to set up your teaming agreements once you've developed your teaming strategy. So now I'd like to introduce our panelists for today. From the prime consultant's perspective, we have Tim Hudson. Tim is the leader of Gensler's aviation and transportation practice areas. Tim has more than 25 years of experience in planning, design, and delivery of regional, hub, and international airport terminal projects. His work is focused on automated passenger processing, including check-in, baggage, and passenger screening. Tim recently served as the chairman of the 2017 ACC Planning, Design, and Construction Symposium. And next we have, from the subconsultant's perspective, Connie Gowder. Connie is the president and CEO of Conoco, a registered DBE firm. Since establishing Conoco in 1990, she has specialized in providing cost estimating, project management, scheduling, construction services, and dispute resolution. Connie is also a fellow member and certified cost consultant of AACE International. From the contractor's perspective, we have Roddy Bogus. Roddy is the Executive Vice President of Aviation at Suffolk. He is responsible for developing the business direction and strategy for the company's aviation projects across all regions. Roddy brings 30 years of experience in the aviation industry and is a licensed architect. He serves as chair of the board of directors for the ACC and also sits on the board of directors for the International Partnering Institute and the International Association of Airport Executives. And Mark Day. There we go. So from the owner's perspective, we have Mark Day, Director of Engineering and Maintenance for Bluegrass Airport. Mark received his Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from the University of Kentucky and holds a Master of Arts in Christian Education from the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. Serving at the Bluegrass Airport since 2006, Mark has had the opportunity to oversee approximately $175 million in airfield, terminal, and general aviation improvements. He currently serves as the Director of Engineering and Maintenance, where he is responsible for airport planning, design, construction, environmental compliance, and all maintenance functions. Thank you to our panelists for being here with us today. Now I'd like to start by inviting Tim Hudson to share his thoughts on teaming from the prime's role. Tim, take it away.
Great. Cody, thank you very much. Matt, thank you for getting us kicked off. So good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are right now. Again, Tim Hudson with Gensler. What I want to talk about, and a lot of this is going to be in response to questions I've received from a young professional standpoint, is as a prime consultant, what do we do when we consider putting together teams, and what can you possibly do to get involved in that process? And so what I'm going to cover today as an overview is going to be building teams. How do we actually put a team together? What do we consider when we do that? Number two, it's going to be who do we team with? I mean, there's certain strategies involved when we start picking team members to join us. The next one's going to be prime versus sub. As far as when you're a prime or a sub, when do you make that decision? From a project-specific standpoint or to pursuit, when do you take on the responsibilities of prime versus not being a prime? And then finally, I want to get into just some suggestions on how YPs can get involved in the process, how you can get engaged in introductions with airport staff members, get involved in the industry to help you get better exposure, to help you with this process. So with that said, next please. Okay, so building teams. When we start talking about building teams, it starts early on. It starts early in the process. It starts with research and understanding when a project's coming to help us start to understand what our team needs to look like. So when I say pre-positioning, I'm not talking about you see an RFQ comes out and you have 3 weeks to respond to it. I'm talking about 6 months in advance, 4 months in advance, 10 months in advance, where you've done your homework, you understand what an airport is going to be doing in the next year, the next 6 months, whatever that time frame is, to then start strategizing, okay, I know this is coming, so what can I do now to best position myself and my team to go out and win? A lot of this is driven by the RFQ requirements, which again, if you're doing your pre-positioning, your homework early on in the process, you should have a pretty good handle on what the airport's going to be looking for in a project. They'll list the scope, they'll list what they expect to be done in that contract, which will then give you a better indication of what does your team structure look like based on what the airport's looking for. Conversations with other consultants. So that's a pipeline of information. It's not always just talking to the airports. You need to be able to talk to other consultants you've worked with in the past. You might have relationships with that you've met at a conference that's working in an airport that you can get in front of and just ask questions. Hey, what are you guys working on right now? What do you see coming in the next 5 years because you have an on-call contract? Is there an opportunity for us to get involved at that airport? And then the timing of it. So when it comes down to building teams and timing, it's tough when you get an RFQ to put a team together quickly, especially the right team, because if it's come out, we typically look at it from the perspective of if we didn't know about it till it came out and we're being asked to team, it's a difficult decision to make for us because by that point, you'd like to think that someone's already done what we've already talked about, like pre-positioning. They've been talking to the airport. They've been doing their homework. They've been going to board meetings. They know what's coming. And maybe we didn't know about it. And so that plays into how we put a team together and if we will at all. Next. Next slide. There we go. Who to team with. So when we start talking about putting a team together, because we made the decision we're going to pursue a project, is where do we start? I feel, at least from my perspective, it starts with relationships. Consultant teams put off a vibe as far as how well they work together. Do they trust each other? They've done this before together. Is it something the airport can interview us and say, you know what, these people, this team has a good feel about them. They know what they're doing. We could work with this team. So it starts with relationships. But also you have to do a team based on successful projects together. You've got to have a trust that I trust you as much as you trust me to do this job together, and that we can bring the airport the best experience for that project to be successful. Consider reputation. Reputation's a big one. You have to do your homework. You have to be able to vet your team members. That could be talking to airports if you have a relationship enough to do that. It could be talking to other consultants and understanding who's got a black mark, who might have had a problem, or who's doing outstanding and who's shining, and who's the airport love, and they're going to be on everyone's team because of it, is understanding, your team members. And local knowledge, that plays a lot in what we do. It's very difficult to go into cities and not have knowledge of the local politics of the local city, the government, anything from drawing review processes to board meetings and procedures. So it's good to have the local knowledge. Like say, civil engineer is a great place to start. They've done a lot of work at the city, a lot of municipal work. They're pretty well connected downtown. So we'll tend to look at companies in that arena that have been in that city for a while, that have good relationships, that understand the city, how it works, and have done a good job in the city favors. And then the smaller disadvantaged businesses, again, based on the RFQ, we'll see sometimes requirements where the cities are going to ask us to include small disadvantaged businesses. So we have to put that into consideration as well. So we have to do our homework on who those people are, who those firms are, and who would make the best teaming members for us, because they bring something that no one else can. Next. Okay, so one of the questions I was asked was, when do you make a decision on a prime versus sub? So again, it's going to be driven by the RFQ requirements and the project types, even the pre-positioning, again, because you know what's coming. But if it's like, say, a master plan, and there's a master plan that's going to be put on the street, say, in 6 months, typically like Gensler, with us being an architectural firm, would not lead that, because that's going to be a lot of engineering. And so we would look to an engineering firm to step up and take the lead on it. No different than if it was a terminal design, then I would see Gensler's going to be the lead on that one, and we're going to take that project as the prime, and then we'll reach out to the other folks to be on our team and ask them and invite them to join us. So it's really determined by the project type. Okay, next. But what's going to be, I think, what's going to resonate best here for the young professionals is, how can you get involved? I mean, there's some of us on this phone call right now that have been doing this for 25 plus years, and it's taken that long to get into the industry relationship chain and understanding the airports and what's really coming and happening, and because everyone's connected. But it takes time to do that. And so what I would suggest is, it starts with building relationships. This is a very relationship-driven, heavy industry that we're in. So some of the things you could do to help that is industry conferences, just like the Design Symposium is a great example. 1,100 people at that meeting, and plenty of time to network. So it's easier to get those introductions in that kind of environment than just to show up at an airport and not know anybody and start that first conversation. So, I would recommend going to conferences, meeting airports, meeting other consultants, build those relationships early on, so at least you're familiar with them and they're familiar with you. So the next time you can go to that airport and go visit with somebody, they know who you are, and then it's an easier conversation. Out of office events. I know it's the hokey statement of, hey, business happens on a golf course, but it's a great place to build relationships. Sometimes get opportunities from those outings. Industry lunches, it's a great opportunity to go support people. Say if someone from an airport is speaking, doing a presentation for lunch, it's a great opportunity to go show support and go show interest, because when they see you, you see them, you go talk to them, they appreciate that. And then introductions and meetings with staff, it's very important, is building those relationships with the airport staff, and not just the director. It goes all the way down the line. You need to be able to meet and understand all the airport staff's needs, personalities, and what they're looking for in a consultant. Research. This is something you can do on your own time. You can do it at lunch at your computer. Capital improvement programs, great place to start. Look at what's coming up in the next 5 years at an airport. Look at the project types. You can see what's coming. You can see when they're scheduled from a perspective of an RFQ release date, as well as an anticipated value. Go to board meetings, free of charge. Great information to go sit in front of those board meetings and just listen to how the airport operates. Listen to what the airport's going to be doing in the future, and it gives you a pretty good handle on the environment at the airport. And then participate in ACC committees, just like this. More exposure to more consultants to this organization will open up more doors than you can ever imagine. So I strongly encourage you to join these committees. And again, attend the conferences. It's the easiest way to meet a lot of people in one setting, very casual, very laid back. And it's a great way to start building those relationships that you will then be able to cherish for the next 20 to 30 years. So with that said, Cody, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Tim. Now I'd like to invite Connie Gowder to share her thoughts from the subconsultant's role.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Cody. I'm going to talk about best practices from the subconsultant perspective, and many of Tim's comments also apply from the subconsultant's perspective, the same thing. The first one would be, before you say yes to teaming, make sure you're following your internal process for your firm. There's a lot of do's and don'ts that many firms have, goes, no-goes. Also, have a general idea of the value of the project. We've had many pleasant surprises over the years, assuming the project was relatively small, only to discover the value was closer to 90 million. So do your homework. And will the pursuit cost more than your profit? Sometimes you have to say no because you're going to spend too much time and money to chase a project, and you're not going to make any money. Know your primes, have a established relationship. The relationships are a two-way street. Share info, share leads, share experiences. And as Tim said, pre-teaming before the RFP is released. That is a huge advantage to be pre-teamed before the RFP hits the street. Be selective on teams to join. You don't have to be on every team. And be a resource for other teammate recommendations. Often the prime might be in your area, or you've previously worked at an airport and want to know who else is working there. So offer up what you know if you can. And the other item is your firm a differentiator? Do you have an expertise, a specialty that you can offer to the prime consultants? Next, please. Do attend the pre-proposal conference. Oftentimes the primes might still be looking for firms to join their team. The question of exclusive or non-exclusive, that's my least favorite request that we get. Depends on your role, who's making the request, your strategy for pursuing the project. Is your firm a differentiator? What are the odds of winning with only one firm? And if you're a DBE, consider, does the owner have exclusions from you being not tying down for exclusive, or do they prohibit it, I should say. And speaking of DBEs, are you providing a valued service or just meeting a goal? So do your homework there. If a project is not a good fit for your firm, be upfront with the prime and say so. And for a variety of reasons, we sometimes offer a recommendation on another firm or even a competitor, although we don't do that very often, but it's a courtesy to them when they're on the hunt for a certain specialty. And teaming agreements, it's always nice to tie down your potential scope with the prime firm before you agree to be on their team. Next, please. For best practices on network building, for a subconsultant, you not only need to know the owners, but the prime consultants, so it's kind of a double. It's best practice for subs to know the owners so they know who you are, that you're not unfamiliar with them when you're on a project team. For referrals, internal, meaning a prime with multiple offices may recommend you to their other offices, or external, meaning the owners may recommend subs they would like to see on their team. It's a mobile industry, and we often work with clients that have changed companies. Our new clients are often with folks that have worked with another firm. So it's all about networking. As Tim said, be active and have active involvement in professional associations like ACC, AAAE, ACI, AMAC, not only national, but regional and state associations, depends on your market area. Be active, attend, and network. And ask others for recommendations if you don't know someone. Everybody's always more than happy to help others meet folks they don't know. Know the owner or the airport, what past and present consultants are working at their airport, who is typically on their selection committee, what kind of questions do they ask at interviews, the degree of politics for selection, or if they're picky about something in their RFP responses. Share that information with the prime if you can. The owner agreement, if it is included with the RFP, be sure to review it, especially for the insurance requirements and the indemnity, and whether it's insurable and you can handle or meet the requirements of the insurance. Network with other subs, they're primes too, and provide updated and relevant info for the RFP submittal. Just because the civil person is known at the airport doesn't mean they are the right person for an architectural project. Next, please. And a few etiquette thoughts. Oops. Sorry. Verify you have no conflicts with other agreements for that owner. If you have multiple projects, make sure it is not going to be a conflict for you to work on that particular project. Confidentiality, if you are on other teams, never share intel from another team. And for the primes, please don't ask a DBE to team when it's obvious there is no work for their services, just to have good faith efforts. And another one for the primes is please don't recycle the subs' resumes or other material from another RFP submittal. It may have changed, or someone else is more suited or has more experience. And primes should let the subs, when you win the job, know their invoice cycles. That's important to a sub because it may take anywhere from 60 to 90 days before your invoice actually gets submitted to the owner or paid. Next, please. Primes should invite your firm to include on a team and not assume or include without permission. Primes should also let the subs know when you've been shortlisted, when you win, and even when you lose, and keep them in the loop once you do win. And when it comes to the interview process, only invite the subs that may have a major role, and not have them sit there and spend a day just to sit there as a chair ornament and have no involvement for the interview process. And that's all I have for now. Thank you. On to Roddy.
Thank you, Connie. And speaking of Roddy, you know, we've seen alternative delivery methods become more and more popular in the past few years, and so in support of that trend, we've invited Roddy Bogus to share his thoughts from the contractor's role. Take it away, Roddy.
Thank you, Cody. Hey, good afternoon to everyone from Central East. If you're west of Central, good morning. If you're in Japan, happy Thursday. You know, Tim made a good point in his conversation about the prime on the AE side, and you may not be thinking about that from a contractor's point of view typically, but more and more we're seeing builders start to pre-position at the same time that the design teams are. 6, 8, 10, 12 months out is not unrealistic to what we're looking at as we begin to pursue work as well. So if we go to the slide that says why team, many of you know that I not too long ago came over to the construction side from the A&E and PMCM side, and what I'm going to be talking about today will be primarily from a standpoint of alternative delivery, design build, construction management at risk, IPD, you know, P3s. While many of the things that I will talk about will certainly be applicable to hard bid or design bid build, my comments today will be focused strictly on alternative design. So the big question from a builder's point of view is why team to begin with? Well, the obvious answer is to win the desired project. But when we're looking at things on whether or not to team, even team with another builder or the right design build team, part of it's risk sharing. And I know that we talk a lot in industry about risk sharing, and our contracts are all based on people's risk and the corners people back into. So that's a big reason to team. The bond capacity of your builders today, we get larger and larger contracts. You know, we have many more large programs that are in the billions of dollars, and the ability to bond these type of things sometimes requires more than one builder to come together. The capabilities, you know, what do you have in the region where this project is going to be going on as a builder? Do you have the abilities to provide all of this, or do you need a teammate to provide those capabilities? Local resources, very similar to capabilities. Do you have the right resources locally? I know that's just as important on the design side. Many times you have an office in a town where you have an airport and you do this type of work, but you may not have the capabilities there. Another reason to team. Self-performance. For the longest time now, we've seen many of the very large builders be nothing more than brokers or construction managers and really do none of the construction work themselves. There seems to be a trend now to start going back and doing some of that work, and so self-performance is a reason to team. You have more control over escalation, so self-performance is a big thing for the builders. Another reason to team is if you're entering a new market or location where you don't really have all your resources set up. A good way to enter that market and have good talent is to team with someone. And then, of course, client relationships. Perhaps you're going after, in our case, an airport that doesn't know who Suffolk is in this case. So I may want to team with a contractor that they know, love, and trust, and that's a good way for them to get a taste of what Suffolk is, what Roddy is, and see if that's a relationship that moves forward. So I talked a little bit about delivery methods, and we'll go to the next slide. We'll talk about these. While not talking about design, bid, build, many of the ways we team are specific to the delivery methods. Oh, that was a nice shot. Design, bid, build, or hard bid. That's usually a lot of just coming together to answer on paper. But as we start to look at design build, progressive design build, construction manager at risk, integrated project delivery or IPD, negotiated, anything that happens in a P3, which is just a big envelope around another method, all these require the builder and the design builder, the designer, in the way I look at things, to come together and function as a team from the get-go. So it's pre-construction services from the building team, working hand in hand with the designers, the architects, the engineers, to create a project that stays on budget, stays on time from the beginning of the project. And that's really, from where I sit, the type of work we're looking for. And that's why my conversation today will be, no matter whether it's design, bid, build, or CMR, design, build, or IPD, we're looking to play from the very beginning. And that's why our pursuits will look a lot like the designer's pursuits. If we talk about culture, which is my next slide, one of the questions that I'll ask is, are my prospective teammates a cultural fit with our culture? With the company I'm working for, Suffolk, right now, we like to think we have a very strong culture and very different than a lot of our competitors. It's very important for us to team with people that share that same culture. Otherwise, how's it going to work when you're working hard together? Are they safety conscious? A huge thing on the build side, and probably just as well should be on the A&E side. Are they focused on delivering exceptional client experiences? We often, as an industry, we go win a project, and when we get done, the client walks through, and if it's a successful project, go, oh, very nice, good job, good luck next time. But really, should we be delivering something where they go look at it and go, damn, this is great. I'd like you guys to do the next project. And so we're looking as a team and people that we team with to provide that exceptional experience to where the client goes, this is really good, can you start my next project tomorrow? Do their core values work with ours? And for instance, ours, probably much like yours, will be passion, integrity, hard work, and professionalism, not just hanging out around the job site. Is their toolbox similar to ours? We all talk about BIM, we talk about VDC these days, but how really does it work? Does your BIM work with my BIM? How do we make this all come together? And then what are our key performance indicators? On the next slide, Tim also hit this early on about trust, and probably for me specifically, when I look for teammates, I'm looking for relationships and trust. And I think we've probably all heard the snip that goes something like this. It takes years to build trust and, just seconds to destroy it. And I think our clients are looking for people that they can trust to do the job. And likewise, when I put a team together, I'm looking for teammates either on the build side or the AE side to team with that I can trust. Do we know them? What are their past experiences? Do we have experience with them? Can we trust them to represent our values, kind of like our culture? What does the client think of them? Because more often than not these days, the brand name of the firm you work for, like Suffolk or Gensler or any other firm, is important. But I subscribe to the fact that my personal brand, being Roddy or Connie or Tim, may be more important. I really think is more important than the company name on the card, because they're hiring you as the individual, and no matter what the company name is, that's who they're looking to bring the project in. And with other members of our team, do they know how to work with us? Sometimes the most awkward times are when you're first learning to work with each other and you have those missteps. So the next slide, we talk a little bit about collaboration and partnering, and these words are used an awful lot in today's environment, no matter where you go, and there's so many different ways to look at it. At Suffolk, we're very big on collaboration and partnering, and we think we're very naturally that way. So we look for our teammates and putting together a team. Do they believe in collaboration and partnering? And that's really the first question. And are they committed? It won't be what they write down and say, but to be better than the standard of care. If you've talked about contracts, if you've gone into risk negotiation and talked with your insurance providers, typically you never guarantee anything to be better than the standard of care. But we're looking to deliver something in reality that's far better than the standard of care. Do they solve problems in the field? It's one thing just to come and go, hey, Rod, you got this problem, let me know when you figure it out, and they go back to doing what they're doing. Or do they come in and say, hey, we've come up with this problem, we've got 3 or 4 potential solutions, let's walk through and solve it here so we keep things moving. And that's where you come to the table with solutions. And really it gets down, is it more of a we thing or is it an I thing when problems go up? And we're really looking for teammates and participants that don't go to their corners, but come to the middle and try to find solutions. Another thing we look for that a lot of our clients will say these days, is it about the contract or the project? What's driving you? Is it the project or the letter of the law in the contract? Do they believe in collaboration or partnering? Again, all these typical things, is it about we or I? And when push comes to shove, are we solving for the project or are we solving for the contract? And then we talk about the corporate resume versus people, which is our next slide. Many times, even when you're working with a new firm, in Suffolk we've had this because our aviation resume has been very small in just one area and we're looking to expand. So our corporate resume does not necessarily have a large body of aviation work. It has referenceable work, it has good work on there, but it's a very small resume. So we'll look a lot on people. Are our people's resumes stronger than our corporate resume? Because for a while we may be relying on the individual resume as opposed to the corporate resume to make part of ours. Will you cherry pick the people to be stronger than the corporate name? We talked a little bit about that earlier. Is the brand name of the individual stronger than the corporate? And for me, that's just as important as the corporate resume is the person resume. And then A players is part of the people. On the next slide, I talk a little bit about, I'm always looking for A players. And I think, if you read any business book, most everybody is. Is who I'm teaming with, do they really have any? Or are they all committed to other jobs? I don't subscribe to bait and switch. We know it does happen. Sometimes it happens just due to issues that are beyond your control, which is not really bait and switch, but we don't go into it that way. I'm looking for B players that can become A players. But as in the graphic there, Steve Jobs said a small team of A+ players can run circles around a giant team of B and C players. We're looking for the A players. Our clients are looking for the A players. And one of the hard questions we have to ask many times is, if you have several jobs in different places, are all your A players used up? Will the A players be able to relocate to where the job is? That's always a big question. Relocation is harder these days, I think. How long will the A players stay on the job? Is it just to get in and then after a year they kind of melt away and go to other projects? And can I afford to relocate the A players? Questions that we ask. And then finally, my last slide, well, pardon me, we've got one more, which is agreements and contracts. One of the first things we want to do is put together a teaming agreement before we even look at a contract. And that teaming agreement is looking just to bind the team together for the proposal. I'm not a big advocate of trying to put together all the terms and conditions, or T's and C's, as you may hear, because we won't know them until we see the actual contract from the client. So we try to be as transparent as possible, letting people know what they may get into. I want to get it signed quickly because there's a certain amount of non-disclosure agreements that are involved when we're teaming together, and I want to not have to worry about that if somebody walks off the job. I want to bind for the team, not for the contract. The teaming agreement will include the NDA. You know, if that person leaves the team or that firm leaves the team, they cannot play with another team. I'm looking to try to have no onerous conditions in teaming agreements, nor do I want to sign one from somebody else's. And then we want them to, our teammates must be able to sign a typical contract agreement, and that's where the transparency comes through. The final thing, which is sometimes the most difficult thing, is we want the agreements between our teaming partners, both building and design, to be negotiated well before the proposal is due. There's nothing worse than trying to put a proposal together and submit it, and at the same time trying to hammer down the agreement where somebody's been over the barrel. Finally, the last piece, which is just as important for me on putting a proposal, is proposal production. You know, when you're putting a team together, who's going to provide the proposal coordinator? Is it going to be a joint thing? I like to have somebody that's overall in charge of putting the proposal together. Who's going to provide the proposal writers? A lot of times, you know, when you're doing approaches, your PMs, and they can describe it, but they're not always great writers. So where does a writer come from? Do you even have that? That's a hard thing to find out at the last minute, that you don't have a good writer. Can key people contribute to the approach, and who are those key people? I believe on all of these alternative delivery types that design and construction entities equally must contribute to this. This isn't that one side does it at the expense of the other side. Each party bears their own costs of producing it, and I'm a big believer in that we're not going to create a boilerplate proposal to win. Certainly there are certain things you want to have proposal to proposal, but just like we say one airport is one airport, each proposal, in my opinion, needs to talk directly to the issues that this airport or a client is looking for. Otherwise, you're not really providing an A team or an A group or solving the client's problems. So from a builder's perspective, that's what I look for in teaming. Be glad to answer any questions later. Thanks, Cody.
All right, and thank you, Roddy. Now, last but not least, I'd like to invite Mark Day to share his thoughts on teaming from the owner's perspective. Mark?
All right. Thanks for allowing me to participate, and because of the caliber of experience that Tim, Connie, and Roddy bring, many of my comments are going to echo what they've already said, but I guess you need to hear it from the owner's perspective. And so I guess we need to make sure we have the right context of this discussion when you're hearing my comments. Bluegrass Airport, we're in a small market, and so you need to make sure that while I'll try to tailor it to the industry from a more holistic perspective, just know that every owner is different, just like every project's different. But some of the things that I'll have to say reflect how we do things that may not be reflective of an airport authority. So everybody wants to be on the winning team. How do you stand out? Whatever your role is, how do you get selected? And so it's one of the things, again, having some consulting experience, it's painful for me to be in a room with a large number of consultants at a pre-proposal meeting, and I look out and I see 30 faces, a lot of people that I know well, and knowing that I'm only going to be able to grab one team that's got 5 or 6. And so I appreciate the attention that you all put into your proposal development, your team development, and going after the work that we're going to do together. So as you try to get on a team, whether you're putting together your own team as the prime, trying to figure out those roles of who's the captain, who's the point guard, who's the power forward. Let's talk. So if there is a me in team or ME, then let's talk about putting together the right me's for this. Next slide. So expertise. Matching the company and the personnel strengths for the specific project. I know this has been mentioned more than once by the other speakers, is making sure that the role that you're going to play is an effective role for the team, for the project, for the client. And if you find yourself looking at particular work at my airport in particular, reach out to me. Let me know, hey, we have this gap. Do you know anybody who does this? Know anybody who does that? I'd be happy to try to help you figure out where you need to be. And obviously, as some of the other speakers mentioned, a lot of those things happen well before a project hits the streets. And also, one thing we look for in teams is, have you been a team with some of the other players on that team with that prime? And so that I know that you're not learning to work together on my job. That happens, especially in a small market airport like this, but knowing that you have prior teaming experience really does matter to us. So, which me for the right client. Many of you have been working on building relationships with your local airports or certain airports that your company does work with, and so you'll see that owner from time to time at local meetings, whether it's board meetings or just coming in to keep up with what's going on at that airport. But that doesn't mean that just because you have that relationship that every project is one that you need to go for. I actually give, I guess, a lot of credit to those firms that will reach out to me and say, hey, you know what, I know we've been looking at this work or that work, but this particular project, we don't feel like we've got the best team, or we don't feel like we've got the amount of people, or we don't feel like this is the right project that we can bring the right team. And I just have a lot of respect for that. You don't have to throw proposals at everything. You guys need to be making money on the projects that you've got in some cases. So other things to ask, if you're going to be the prime, I'd highly recommend that you introduce yourself well before the proposal hits the street, and because often as a public entity we need to go into a sort of cone of silence about the project. We do have an open process, but it sure does help to know you beforehand. It sure does help to learn a little bit about your people and your company. And once a project hits the streets and we go into that sort of cone of silence, my ability to wear you out with questions in an informal environment becomes much more limited. So love to have meetings with potential consultants and contractors well ahead of projects, because I certainly like to have those open-ended conversations as well. So which me for the right location. Again, from a small perspective, I just don't have a lot of aviation design expertise at my beck and call in the area where my airport is. So I fully expect that I'm going to hire people from all over and come in and take my terminal project, my airfield project, and have that expertise that my local consultants are not necessarily going to have. But as far as the subs on the teams go, certainly there's a variety of meaningful services that can be provided. Somebody mentioned civil, whether it's survey, geotech. There's a variety of things, especially geotech, having a local team member who's familiar with their own dirt, if you will, and how to deal with that. Which means for the right timing. I say this in that while you have a certain backlog of projects already under your belt that you're working on, and you're always trying to market and be ready for the next project, that don't stretch yourself too thin. You're not going to be able to provide a great level of service to me. You're not going to be able to do that to the clients that you already are serving at the time. So just be smart about it. And you need to be honest with your other teaming partners with that as well. And so generally speaking, while we certainly have people that we work with on a regular basis, sometimes an irregular basis, we want to make sure that you can provide excellence in all of these areas. So what about the flip side? What about putting together the wrong means? Next slide. Unfortunately, there's still some pockets of bad culture out there as far as who can spend the most time with the client or buy the most meals or whatever. And I just really like to have this dreamy idea that folks that are in my position know that we're hiring people, that we're hiring expertise, that we're, or if you will, buying the blood, sweat, and tears of your prior projects, your prior experience, and that while we certainly can get together over a meal or a drink, whether it's locally or at a conference, that buying the most lunches doesn't earn the job. Your experience, your professionalism should be what what earns you that job. Lack of the understanding or team roles. Boy, I've already heard the term bait and switch used here, and that's something that we really look carefully at in the proposals. As we review the personnel's experience and resumes, and we review your company's experience and resumes, we're looking for a match. Just because that this project manager comes in and has this experience, and yet then we look at the company resume of all these projects and they don't match up, then I'm wondering, is this the right project manager for the job? Yes, I know that this national aviation design firm can handle my job, but I don't know if this project manager or this key designer is the right fit. So make sure that you're very clear in matching up those areas of your proposals. Too many chiefs, not enough Indians. Again, it just depends on the size of the project. Got to be cautious. Sometimes we see proposals that appear to have too many chiefs on the team, and while it's often better to try to structure yourselves appropriately for that project, every now and then maybe this other large firm has a key person that has that particular expertise that you're looking for, and demonstrate that. So don't shy away from that, but be cautious that that the size of your team and the expertise matches for that, because I can't afford all of your chiefs. I need to be paying for some of your Indians as well. Creativity. This is something that architects love, engineers, it depends as far as the creativity on the job. That how far can you or should you go in your proposals, in putting your teams together? And from the owner's perspective, while we know that you're working hard to stand out at the proposal stage and even possibly the interview stage, depending on how the project comes into play, and we don't mind you thinking out of the box. We like you bringing those ideas, those lessons learned, the things that you might bring to the table that others don't. But sometimes things that tend to go a little too far off the beaten path, and or maybe there's a team member that you're not sure if their expertise has to happen on the job, but if you've got somebody that you can bring in that's a real value-added area, and just from an owner's perspective, while that area might not be used initially, knowing that you can tap into it, that might help give you an edge. Lastly, claims of greatness. Wow, I know that all of your budgets, or excuse me, all of your projects were on time, all of them were under budget, and just with our projects, I know that our budgets and our schedules kind of morph with the life of the project. But again, as far as what I would consider greatness is not just were you involved in that project, but being able to demonstrate the role that individual and that company had in that project, and especially, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the lessons learned. When the going got rough, what did you do to dig yourself out of the hole? How did the entire team come together to make that happen? And so again, because we're buying that blood, sweat, and tears of your prior projects and your prior experiences, and so knowing how you and your team came through that, to me, is one of the things that will help you demonstrate your greatness. So again, thank you for your time. Look forward to answering questions.
All right. Thanks again, Mark. And Matt, back here real quick. We have time for a couple of questions, which we'll get to in just a second, but I wanted to quickly cover some of the upcoming YP activities that will be taking place over the next several months. The forum hosts quarterly conference calls with industry-leading guest speakers, as well as the 360 Degrees of Aviation, which allows young professionals to present to the group their background and projects they're working on. Stay tuned for updates on the next call. The ACC Security Capabilities Workshop is also scheduled for July 18 through 20 in Arlington, Virginia. The one other conference we're holding this summer, the ACC Airports Technical Workshop, is just 2 weeks off. We'll be featuring opportunities to have an open dialogue with more than 20 representatives from the FAA Office of Airports. As part of the ATW, Conoco is hosting the next ACC Young Professionals Regional Meetup. Join YPs and ATW attendees the night of June 21st in Arlington, Virginia. Details will be sent out to all the members of the YP Forum. Please RSVP back to Pinar at ACC headquarters. The forum is planning a number of these meetups across the country this year. In fact, the first meetup was held just 2 weeks ago in Los Angeles, hosted by HNTP. A Chicago event is in the works as well. If you're interested in hosting a meetup or have any questions, please again reach out to Pinar at the email on your screen. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Cody. Great presentations, and I'm going to have Cody wrap us up with a couple of questions.
All right, thanks, Matt. Well, while we're discussing upcoming YP activities, I'd like to mention a special opportunity for our YPs to practice the teaming skills that our panelists have discussed today. The ACC is currently accepting proposals for the YP Innovation Competition, and as a past participant, I can say this is a great opportunity to reach out to the contacts you've made across the aviation industry and work collaboratively on whatever topic interests you the most. So if you are interested, but you don't have any prospective teammates, that's not a problem. Just reach out to Pinar at ACC and she can put you in touch with other YPs. Just keep in mind that the abstracts are due by June 30th, so that's just a short statement of what your topic will be, so still got plenty of time to get that done. And for more information on the competition, please visit the ACC website. So I know we're getting pretty short on time here, but for those of you who can stay around, we'd like to pose some questions to our panelists. And so just look through what we've been asked here. So the first one I'm going to direct to Tim, and I think Connie touched on this a little bit with her sub-consultant role perspective, but curious, Tim, on what your thoughts are on how does a prime consultant decide when they must go exclusive with a sub-consultant, or when they will ask to go exclusive versus accepting that a sub is going to be on multiple teams?
Good question. So in some instances, we'll come across a situation where you have a sub-consultant that's been working at the airport, say, for 5 years, 6 years, has a great track record, and there's an expectation that the airport would like to see them on multiple teams because they have a certain trust for that sub-consultant. There's those situations where we will, accept it. It is what it is. There's other times, though, that we will, as a prime, ask for exclusivity, as long as it's allowed. Not every airport allows it, but we do it because sometimes we want to have a differentiator on the team too, though. It'd be nice to be able to have, a team of exclusive members to make it a special team. It's kind of like the all-in approach. We're giving the airport a team that's been tailored for that project, and I want to have differentiators on the team. And to me, sometimes exclusivity can make that work. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Tim. Connie, do you have anything to add?
No, we will go exclusive when we have a major role on a project, so that is usually a differentiator for us, is how much role we will have on a project.
Okay, thank you, folks. Next question is going to be directed to Roddy. Roddy, in design build procurement, how does the designer not have any sub-consultants?
No, that's typically what we do when we're putting a design build together is we'll reach out to the designer that we think gives us the best opportunity. Very similar to what Tim said, we're looking to create a team that makes a difference. And coming from the AE side, I'm very keen on letting the AE provide their own consultants. I try not to tell them who they need to have, and so from the get-go, I'm looking at who's the designer that I want. Well, we may be thinking down the line we specifically want this baggage handling company, this MEP engineer, but I really want to leave that up to the designers because those sub-consultants will fall under their tier and not mine.
Okay. Thank you, Roddy. This next question is directed to Mark. Mark, you discussed in your talk the concept of if a consultant has a part of their team missing, they can come to the owner and ask who may be able to fill that role. I know that can be a touchy subject. Asking an owner who they prefer on a team is something that can put the owner in a bind. What's the best way to ask an owner what consultants they prefer, who's done good work, that kind of thing, without stepping over a line into endorsing one firm over another?
You're exactly right. It does. It is touchy, and we'll exercise a lot of caution in how we bring that. So the question shouldn't be who do you prefer, or asking questions about how was their performance, as much as the expertise. who do you know that can do this service, geotech? Who do you know that can do this survey? Who do you know that can provide this particular area of design, access control specialties? And we'll do our best to share with you who we think can do that. And I'm not really a poker player, so I'm just going to just throw this out there. That asking it that way, it kind of offers me the opportunity to just list some firms out, and I'm probably not going to mention the ones that I'd rather you not have on the job.
Yeah, and great way to phrase that, to keep yourself out of trouble there. The next question is, which a daily struggle, I know. The next question is to Roddy, and Roddy, you talked about putting together the team of A players, and do you have any thoughts on how the airport procurement process can help you put together that team of A players, or maybe some of the things you've seen which hinder your ability to put together that team?
I'll give you one personal deal is, we're seeing more and more airports cherry pick as well and pick, I want this person from this firm, I want this person from this firm, and this person from this firm. And that makes it difficult. And when I was on the AE side, that made it difficult to sometimes go after and procure those projects, knowing that you're not procuring a whole suite of services. You're procuring maybe just the PM or maybe just the baggage piece. And so that has proven to be a little bit difficult. From the standpoint of A players, from where I sit now, I don't think any airport's going to say, we don't want your best players. I think the most difficult thing is to discern who are the best players for that particular client. Every client's a little bit different. You heard Mark talk about, sometimes I can't pay for all your high-level people, so I want some Indians as well, and I think every client's like that. How do you mix up the A players for the various stratas that you have? And really, that's more an exercise in discernment of who are the A players for the particular roles that you have. The San Francisco airport is one that we've recently been dealing with, and they have a strong message on what A players bring, and they have a strong culture that you can almost kind of check off about what they're looking for. But that's one of the few airports where I've really found a lot of help directly from the airport's procurement process to help me discern who my A players may be.
Okay, thank you. Mark, just curious if you have anything to add to that, which things or practices you see that could help or hurt a team's ability to put together their best players.
I'm just going to borrow some comments that were made by the others during their presentations. A lot of this is planned out ahead. Knowing the work that's coming out, allowing for that early planning, doing your best to assemble the great team early on before the project hits the streets. And so to me, it's the preparation, and I think that really spills over into how the proposals are put together and how teams demonstrate that.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Okay, next one is going to be directed to Tim and Connie, and we'll start with Tim. When an airport authority has difficult contracting language, maybe relating to indemnification or levels of risk, how do you try to resolve that between yourself and your subconsultants? What I'm talking about is passing down. Do you pass through those risks, or do you try to resolve them yourself? What's the best practices for that?
That's a good question. From my perspective, it starts with the prime. I mean, the RFQ goes out, the prime's going, there's a lot of airports now that will start to attach the contracts in advance to have you look at to make sure you don't have any problems with the language, like indemnification. So you kind of get a heads up, because the last thing the airport wants to do is go through a procurement process that takes 2 months and they're ready to sign a contract. You sit at the table being selected as the winner and say, yeah, I can't sign that contract. So, we like to get out ahead of it early. And we have our legal counsel within Gensler, like many large companies will. We'll have them go through and read the language, and they'll come back with comments. Because what my goal is to make sure I'm not going to push that down onto the subs. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that we're all on the same page. And I'm just not going to say, well, we can do it, but they can. I'm going to push it on them anyway, because I don't think that's right. So we do everything we can to make it fair.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Connie?
When we look at it, we also look at whether there is language in the RFP that indicates they are receptive to changes or not. We frequently see owner agreements that say you have to accept the way it's written or not. So we look at that when we're looking at projects and whether we're going to continue the pursuit or not.
One thing, I mean, just if I might add on to that, you know, we did that deal in Memphis, Knoxville, at the conference where Connie moderated. I was on a panel with TJ. We talked about this exact topic, and you know, what gets to be the challenges with those contracts is if we just take it at face value and say, okay, we're not going to change anything, we're not going to review it, we're just going to accept it because we want the work. Well, then sometimes we put ourselves in a position that our insurance companies would not take too kindly to, even to the point of saying we've done something, we've signed a contract that's not insurable by them. So it takes a lot of work up front to make sure it's good for everyone involved.
Great points, guys. Thank you for your answers. That'll do it for questions now. Matt?
Yep. Sorry, I was going to just from the owner side throw in something on that the owners need to be educated as well. And actually, I'll give credit to your firm, you did for us, and we worked through some of that indemnification language. ACC actually got involved and helped us change some things a little bit. Our legal counsel is more risk averse than our staff, and so you know, we rely on our consultants to help us understand that while some of those terms that we know are watching our back, sometimes it's more onerous than we realize. And so you know, I would encourage you guys, and some of that probably needs to happen outside of the proposal period that you're working with your clients, but we need you guys educating us as well on those things.
Great points all around, guys. Yeah, and echoing the insurance folks. Yes, we've had to learn those lessons the hard way when we go to our insurance providers and show them what we signed, the contracts we already signed, and yeah, we have to pass those lessons learned along. So thank you all for your responses. That'll do it for questions, everyone. Matt, I'll let you wrap it up.
All right. Thanks again to Tim, Connie, Roddy, Mark, and to Cody for participating and taking on the organization in today's webinar. That was some great content and good advice for everyone. To all of you participating, please stand by. You'll be receiving an email in this afternoon that will include a copy of the presentation as well as a link to a survey. We'd greatly appreciate your feedback both on the content of the webinar application, and the interface as well. You'll also find an opportunity in there to sign up for the YP Forum as well as the ACC committees, which Tim spoke about earlier in the presentation. Stay tuned for future webinars sponsored by the ACC YP Forum as well as our webinars from the ACC Institute. Thanks again for joining us, and we hope you all have a great afternoon. Goodbye.